All right. Chris von Lindenberg here. Many of you know me as V. And today I have a special guest, our strategic partner, Mr. Steve Segal. Steve is a retired law enforcement professional. For our audience, we're talking today about challenges as we approach the law enforcement career transition, that is retirement. And Steve, as a retired law enforcement professional, is committed to giving back to a career that he loved, giving back to the people that he enjoyed serving with, and he gets excited about helping others. And he's really created an interesting niche and started a business that is focused on assisting retired law enforcement professionals or soon to be retired law enforcement professionals, as well as military, in approaching how to prepare for what's next professionally. As part of a segment of videos that we're doing, this piece fills a really important and special place to me. I've looked for years to find somebody as amazing as Steve. But the challenges that our team has identified, I'm going to share a couple of them, and we're going to get Steve's insight on some of these today, as well as others that he may come up with. But I'm just going to rattle off a few of the challenges that we see relative to the law enforcement profession. And Steve, before I jump into that, I just want to say welcome and thank you so much for joining. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you having me here.
Absolutely. So here are a couple challenges, Steve, that our team came up with that we see. And I think some of these you and I have talked about in the past as well. People fail to network outside of law enforcement circles. People fail to really get their social media profiles tight and right when it comes time to look for what's next, job searches and whatnot. We see a challenge that a lot of law enforcement professionals have a tough time trying to communicate effectively the transferable skill sets that they've learned over the course of their tenure in law enforcement. And in a way, maybe that even ties into, I think sometimes folks may experience sort of a self-defeating mindset of, well, I only know police work, or they don't have confidence in their capabilities beyond police work, when in fact, I think they're amazing candidates. They're trustworthy, they're drug-free, they are reliable to a fault. They show up on time. The paramilitary background is just, I think, great. Other challenges, the procrastination of starting the job search early enough. And it's kind of interesting that we see different agencies with sort of different cultures. Some agencies, people don't mind saying, yeah, I'm approaching retirement, I'm going to start looking. But other agencies, people hold their cards kind of close to the vest and they say, I don't want anyone to know I'm looking because I don't want to miss an opportunity for promotion, or I don't want them to know what I'm looking at because, well, frankly, it may turn into a competition situation. So I think it's kind of a mindset of scarcity sometimes occurs. And then, of course, I think some of the basics. How do I write the right resume? And how do I write the right cover letter? And even if I do a great job with those, am I really ready to interview? So, Steve, I just rattled off a bunch that our team had come up with and we see all the time. Let me ask, is there any of those that you just see as like a highlight, or any that you think I may have missed? How would you approach this if you were a retiring law enforcement professional, or in what you do? How would you help somebody?
Well, Chris, you're spot on with the number of issues that you identified. Those are clearly among the top that I see amongst my clients. And I like to say the overarching concept is preparation, or the lack thereof. Preparation for what your next career will look like. Preparation for that specific role or roles when you decide upon what that will be. And then there's preparation actually for the separation of service, which is a great causation of anxiety and stress and concern, leaving the force, leaving the camaraderie that exists there. And then, like you said, also preparing for the successful job acquisition. What are the tools that I need to successfully hunt for and achieve a job, the job of my choice, my career, what I want to do? And I find a lot of law enforcement officers do fail to recognize the readily transferable skills that they do have. They have many skills that they are easily transferable and translatable into the corporate sector or the private sector, but they just don't realize that they do have that. So a great deal of my concern is identifying and enlightening them, making them aware that they do have these very transferable skills, that turns on a light in their head that opens up more opportunities in their head for sure.
Mm,
A lot of them, like you said, care to not get out of their comfort zone, work in areas like security and executive protection and investigations, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But if you feel that you're limited to doing that because you don't have those skills, then that's a mistake. So just increasing the awareness of that in people, again, presents them and gives them opportunities for things they might not have considered on their own.
so,
And then the realization, I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, I was going
And
to
the
say,
realization that they have to prepare, there's a lot of work involved with all of this.
right. So the realities are just because I am retiring from a career in law enforcement should not restrict me to having to only work in law enforcement or a directly related field such as corporate security. I can actually do so much more than that. My skill set is really much more diverse than what I might perceive it to be. But somebody like
That,
yourself kind of help draw that out. What are my other interests?
it absolutely is. And I use the analogy to like an 18-year-old who's deciding what they want to do with their life and their career. And
Mm,
they're able to do that. They're able to decide what they want to do. And they're able to do things like go to technical schools, go to colleges, and achieve the necessary degrees and experience that they need to do almost anything they want to do. So there's nothing to stop a law enforcement officer from doing the very same.
mm,
Obviously, the more of a transition you want to make, that will take more time and more preparation. It'll be a greater transition. But if
mm,
you start early enough, and I like to get my clients in the mindset of starting to think of this early in their careers. I began to think of it on my own. I knew there was life after law enforcement. I
yep,
knew that I was be doing something else somewhere down the line, whether it be 25, 30 or more years. And then I began to set myself up with what that looks like, uh, perform what I call a gap analysis, understand what my current situation is, and then look at what my desired situation is. And then what do I have to do to bridge that gap, whether it be with additional experience in different units in the department, whether it be obtaining additional training through the department, whether it be obtaining formal training like college outside of the department.
mm.
Um, all of that are things to readily consider. I stress again the importance of beginning to think of this in the beginning as early as possible. I know it looks like a long time away, those 25 or 30 years,
Yeah.
but again, there's situations, unfortunately, where people
Mm,
leave service for unanticipated reasons. Maybe there's an injury. Maybe there's something going on in a household. Maybe they just decide they don't want to do this career anymore.
sure.
Maybe there's a layoff. All these things are possible. So you can't just assume you're going to make it to 25 or 30 years either.
So, Steve, let me ask another question. I know that different agencies have different hiring standards in terms of education. Some view very favorably the military background. Some historically had required a college degree in lieu of or in addition to some other parameters with military. But I guess I also have found that certain individuals have not completed a degree but aren't far away from completing it. How significant is having a degree in looking for life and career work, a job post law enforcement? How significant is the degree itself? Like, how would you approach that in helping someone with a transition?
Well, obviously, it depends greatly on what it is you want to do, right? The more of a transition into something different, the more you might require that additional experience, that additional formal college education to achieve it. A
Mm,
lot of private entities look for someone who has a degree. And we know the degree doesn't necessarily make you a better employee, but it also speaks to your soft skills. It speaks to your dedication to want to pursue a career. Sacrifices that you make attending college while you're on the job demonstrates a lot about that person's character. And that's very important. I always like to stress that these soft skills are as important, if not more important, than the hard skills, the training, education, and experience. So, generally speaking, for a lot of positions, a college degree is looked upon as not a required necessarily, but something that they value. And
Yeah,
again, not only for the knowledge that you might attain in college, but also I think it speaks again towards the character of that person.
that's interesting. Um, one of the challenges you had shared with me that you face with your business was, with your background in law enforcement. I remember a story you shared. You shared with me that when you were younger and seeing folks work towards promotional steps, getting promoted through the ranks, many of them would invest time in studying and they would hire professionals perhaps to help them better prepare to get that promotion. I think that's smart. I believe in coaches personally. I believe in bettering yourself. I believe in education. And we had talked about, in context, we had talked about how people might study together on the job, but when it was time to test, I'll use my terminology, it's almost like the gloves come off and we're now all competing for the same small number of seats. And then when it's time to retire, the challenge that sometimes folks think they just do this on their own. What's your take on that? Like, what would you share to those that are listening in today? Can you elaborate?
Well, I like to operate in the world of the things you don't know, you don't know, right?
Hmm.
Those are the things that are out there that you really don't have any information about. So you can't learn it, you can't study, you can't do anything with it. So the job hunting, everything that goes with the job hunting process today has evolved tremendously over the time from when these individuals have first started in law enforcement, how you job hunt effectively and efficiently, how you network efficiently, how you use social media to help you and market yourself in a job hunt, um, how to interview, how to negotiate compensation packages, and ultimately how to succeed and advance in the corporate world if that's where you want to go.
Hmm.
So I think it's a smart investment and certainly a time saver. And to invest in someone who has walked in your shoes, someone who's been in law enforcement, who knows what skills you developed and utilized, knows the type of personalities that exist in law enforcement, who has made the transition successfully into the corporate world and has experience identifying these challenges and obstacles that exist in a lot of aspects of it, from preparing your resume to writing a cover letter. How do I interview? What are the questions they're going to ask me? How do I market myself? What about my social media presence? How do I compete and get above everybody else?
Hmm.
So those are the things that I like to impart on my clients, set them up with some structure, having a plan with goals in mind and milestones so that they
Yeah.
don't go into it haphazardly. So just as taking these study groups will help enlighten you on the things you're going to encounter during the testing process, someone like myself could certainly open your eyes and awareness to the things, the obstacles and the challenges that you're going to expect, how to succeed and overcome them, how to beat the competition, how to do this as efficiently and effectively as possible with as little stress and anxiety. I mean, job hunting is a full-time job. It really is. And you need to plan the work and then work the plan, as they say.
Yeah. I think of the field of law enforcement, and I would say I fall into the same personality trait. I'm a type A, right? And there are many type
Right.
A, and that's not a bad thing. But we're highly motivated. We want to get things done, but we are in law enforcement, your ranks, there's sort of gets to a pencil point, right? There's only so many seats at the top, and not everyone gets to be chief, not everyone gets to be colonel, or in charge of the agency. And so I think it helps reinforce a scarcity mindset that, oh my gosh, there are only so many jobs. There's only so many good jobs. And it kind of promotes a sort of competition, a competitive spirit it invokes. And one of my coaches, that I remember a lesson very well. He had talked about, think of a world of abundance and not one of scarcity. Think of how collaborations can help open, new doors to new opportunities. And when you're talking about social media, if your nucleus of friends looks like a bullseye, right? Really tight pattern, It looks like a bullseye. All of your friends are in this tight circle and you're all the same and you're all in law enforcement in many cases. We got to expand that. How important is networking? How important is it to expand your circle beyond law enforcement? How important is it to really start working your connections and broadening the number of relationships you have? Why is that important in a career transition or job search?
Networking is really the key. It was a key not only to help me on the job, but it certainly was a key to help me obtain the positions that I did after the job. So networking is something that you want to obviously initiate as early as possible and make it, if you've decided like what kind of role that you might go into, what type of corporation you might want to work for. Is it the private sector? Is it the government? Then obviously you want to not only expand your network, but you want to concentrate developing your network in that specific industry, people in that specific type of corporation, so that you can focus in on people who are most likely have the ability to help you. And
Hmm.
it's about establishing relationships. And I'm not just talking, I'm going to date myself here. I'm not just talking about a Rolodex full of business cards. I'm talking about real relationships where you have frequent interaction with someone. Perhaps you go to professional meetings and you attend seminars and you meet these people and share a drink or have a conversation over a meal and explain to them what you're up to, and having a mutually beneficial arrangement between those, you and the other person, and growing your network exponentially that way.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're just in it by yourself. I mean,
Hmm.
as your network grows and as you keep them aware of what you're up to, they are an additional set of eyes and ears for you should opportunities arise
Yeah.
that you have no knowledge about. And I'll stress the opportunities that arise in this world today don't come from posted job openings. They come through networking. They come through recommendations and referrals. That's how people get hired these days.
I
So
believe.
without that, you're fishing in a pond with and you're in it with 1,000 other fishermen all around the edge of the lake, and you're
Yeah.
all fishing in that same small pond. But when you expand your network and develop it, you have access to so much more opportunity to you and people who can benefit you.
I think about the law enforcement profession, and I came very close to go into the academy myself, and decided last minute it wasn't the right career fit for me. But I have a genuine interest in helping others, and I believe that to be true for many law enforcement professionals as they enter the career. At least they still have faith in humanity, and their goal is to help others. And I believe that's part of who you are as well. But you know what? If we have faith in humanity to some degree, you got to realize that it doesn't matter really who you are. If you ask somebody on the street for help, if you ask a friend for help, people will usually listen to what you're asking for. And I think it's human nature to be helpful for many people. And I think there's no harm in, if there's a career that you've identified, a job, a particular role, to network to someone who's in that role and ask for help. Would you mind sharing with me what is it that your career is like? What is it that your job's like? And if I was really interested in that type of field that you're in, how is it that you might advise me to take some next steps? How might I really make myself a good candidate? I think if you ask somebody for help, they may be willing to assist you, put a hand out. What do you think?
Well, first of all, let me say that LinkedIn is probably the environment you want to be in for that type of networking for sure. It's
Mm,
easily to identify people in specific companies in specific industries who have similar backgrounds and things
smart.
that they're in places that you are interested in pursuing yourself. But it comes with work. And I stress to people, it doesn't start with, and you would never want to ask someone for help at an initial discussion. I mean,
Mm,
people get hit with that all the time, and as helpful as people might want to be, they have a job to do too. They have a limited amount of time. They
right.
don't know you. So I suggest you start off slow, as if with any relationship, if you're dating or whatever the case may be, you start off with a conversation, an informational conversation. You show interest in what they're doing. You want to know how they got to where they are, what obstacles and challenges did they face, how did they overcome them, and generally, I find people want to talk about themselves. They enjoy talking about their own experience, and they're helping you in the same token. So that's how it starts. And then it continues. It should continue with other periodic discussions of a similar nature. informing them what you're up to without asking them to get you a job. The hope is, if you do this properly, that they will see that you're a genuine person who has value to share, and that may be of value to their own company. And then hopefully they have the realization that when an opportunity exists, they'll reach out to you and present it with you, and do perhaps maybe even make a recommendation or referral for you if you should apply for a particular job. And these people can benefit too. In my last company, employers were given $2,000, $3,000 or more for referral to someone who was hired, that they recommended. And companies like that type of employee, because those type of employees, by and large, generally to stay longer at the company. The people who come in through recommendations from their own employees.
Yeah, I think this is a good segue. I know for time we'll button up here pretty quickly, but I think that a lot of folks should view the work that you do as an investment in themselves. And what I mean by that is, people invest in things, people purchase things when they're tangible, people perceive there to be value. But really, by hiring someone such as a career transition coach like yourself, what you're doing is making an investment in yourself. And if that small investment, that monetary investment, helps you land the job of your dreams, sorry, too much coffee, the tongue can't keep up with the mind, the job of your dreams, then that's money well spent. If it's the right job, the right pay, the right things, that's money well spent as an investment in your future. And every year you stay in that job, that investment gets smaller, smaller, smaller. The return on that investment is bigger, bigger, bigger. So Steve, I didn't ask at the beginning. I strategically waited to the end. 2 questions for you to close us out. One, our viewers, when I mentioned that you were prior law enforcement, they probably in their mind would like to know, what type of law enforcement officer were you? Were you a beat cop walking the street? Were you a drug narcotics expert? So what type of cop were you? But the second question that I also want you to answer is, do you know what you're talking about? As in, what jobs have you held personally post law enforcement that gives you experience and knowledge of the industry today in which you serve? So what did you do as a police officer or law enforcement professional, if I may, and what did you do after for our audience?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so I worked in a fairly large prosecutor's office in New Jersey, which is similar to district attorney's offices elsewhere. Starting out as a detective, I always was passionate about doing investigations, and I was fortunate to be able to break into the field of my choice. And I did a lot of white-collar crime and corruption initially, financial crimes. And I realized that that was something that I could parlay into good experience for my ultimate transition into the corporate world, doing something similar like that. I had a great deal of experience doing narcotics investigations. I was a narcotics sergeant, and we did many major narcotics investigations. I had the opportunity to work in our organized crime unit, which we have a smattering of in New Jersey, just a little bit of organized crime, doing traditional organized crime investigations, working on wiretaps, doing some major raids and search warrants and things of that nature. I was the bias crime officer, so I conducted investigations into bias crimes. I actually taught bias crime and cultural awareness in the academy, along with financial crimes. I was a commander of our high-tech unit, which did all our high-tech online computer investigations and the examination of seized devices and things of that nature. While I was in the job, I was fortunate enough to be involved in the interview process. So I conducted and sat in on over 100 detective candidate interviews, which was great experience because it gave me an opportunity to see what it was like sitting on the other side of that table. And then ultimately, I retired as a captain, where I was in charge of literally half of the investigative staff in our office and conducting budgetary projects and assisting our men and women in being able to have the resources to do the job that they need efficiently and effectively. And I retired as a detective captain in 2010. My initial position outside of that, I became a claims fraud investigator for a small insurance company in New Jersey, where I was investigating homeowners, automobile, and application fraud. And I did get that job with the assistance of my network, I might add, someone who I knew for 35 years was the key factor in helping me, I say helping me, get that position. So you never know when someone that you've been in, who's been in your network for 10, 20, 35 years may be of use to you, right? And that was a perfect example.
Yeah.
And then I had an opportunity to work for a large banking institution, a worldwide global bank doing internal and external fraud investigations. Again, that transition was assisted again with the help of my network. Actually, someone who was one of my detective sergeants who went to work at that entity and then referred or recommended me for that position. Again, key factor, the network. I keep stressing the network. Unfortunately, I didn't like the banking environment very much, and I wanted to return to the world of insurance. And I did that, returning to, again, a large global insurance company as an internal fraud investigator. And this time I was able to make that transition without the assistance of a network. I was actually able to get that job through a posted job opening. So I've done the transition in a variety of different ways. I've seen the challenges and obstacles involved with such things. And frankly, just briefly mention the stereotypes that you might face sometimes as a law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
If they've never hired someone from law enforcement before, they might have certain perceptions of you as being arrogant, not wanting to fit in well with the culture there. Perhaps you want to interrogate their employees instead of interview them, or that you're not going to be able to take direction from someone who's half your age, especially if you've been a chief or a supervisor before. And lastly, that you're someone who might want to leave because if things get rough, because you have a nice cushy pension. So those things are out there that I make my clients aware of them. They're certainly achievable, overcomeable in the interview process if you know and expect them and prepare for them.
That's awesome. So thank you, Steve, for your time today. Thank you for those of you that are tuning in and watching. Went a little longer than we thought, but the realities are good information. Steve is somebody that is a strategic partner of ours. You can find him on our website. You can also, if you Google high caliber career transitions, Steve Segal, you'll be able to find him as well. The website, www.hc-ct.com. So you can check him out there as well. But if you got any questions for Steve, I'd invite you to reach out. And this is just one component of so many. But Steve, grateful that you're part of our strategic partner team. Grateful that we can work together, collaborate, and help get good people into good hands. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you too. I look forward to being of service to your clients and our law enforcement brothers and sisters wherever possible. Thank you so much for your help and assistance.
Love it. Love it. Y'all be safe. Thanks for tuning in.